Well, welcome to Bible Study Online for Christchurch Lavender Bay. We are very blessed and privileged to have Bishop Paul Barnett among us. He is indeed a well-respected teacher and author of many books. Paul and I were in discussion about how we can assist people during isolation in our COVID-19 crisis, and Paul suggested that we do a Bible study in the book of Philippians. It's a bit of a theme for us at the moment, looking at the Apostle Paul. We're preaching through Ephesians at the moment, and so here is a Bible study that you can use either individually or within your Bible study groups as we discuss various aspects of Paul's letter to the Philippians. Philippians is a book that's filled with joy and hope, and that is certainly something that we need during this time. So special welcome to you, Paul. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much. Lovely to be in your home.
Yeah. Oh, well, it's a pleasure to have you here as well. It's not often that we're going to be able to do in people's homes, but just so everyone knows, it's just the two of us, and we're 2 metres distant. We're following all protocols, but it's good to be in fellowship nonetheless.
No more than two?
No more than two, unless you're at a funeral, in which case you can have 10. But
okay.
Yeah. Or a wedding, just 5, but there we are.
No.
Paul, how have you found home life in this present situation? Are you and Anita mostly isolated at home?
Entirely isolated.
Yeah.
It's very strange.
Yeah.
I'll tell you one person who's very happy about it. Bella, the dog.
I've seen a number of clips at the moment where dogs are saying, I've had enough walks already. What are all these people doing at home? And cats saying, I normally have a quiet time in the middle of the day and everyone's home. What's going on? So,
well, she's happy.
Yeah. Ecstatic.
But, cabin fever is a reality for some people.
Yes. And as the days and weeks go on, I think we'll find out, won't we?
What it's going to be like after 2 months of it.
Yeah. No. Looking after ourselves and our mental, physical and spiritual health is going to be really important. And
I think so, yes.
Yeah, thank you for doing this. It will help people sort of feel a bit more at home, see some familiar faces and engage in the Bible. So,
yes.
Paul, Philippians, do you want to launch us off and tell us a bit about the background of Philippians and Paul as well?
Yes. Philippians is one of Paul's last letters, written from Rome. In about the year AD 62. So what I've done in these notes is to give a brief survey of Paul's life up to that point. We don't know exactly when Paul was born, but I'm guessing it was about the year AD 5. So the Tarsus years, Paul refers to them in his 3rd chapter of Philippians, when he speaks about being circumcised on the 8th day, of the people of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew of Hebrews. And then the book of Acts says in chapter 22, the tribune answered, I bought Roman citizenship for a large sum. But Paul was able to say,
I'm a
Roman citizen by birth.
Yeah.
A rare thing. So, as a mid-teenager, he relocates in Jerusalem. It's possible his family brought him there and stayed there with him. We know later on that he had a sister that lived in Jerusalem. So he was educated at the feet of Gamaliel, who was the most eminent rabbi of the times, according to the strict manner of the law of our fathers. And then he says, as to the law of Pharisee, as to zeal a persecutor of the church, as to righteousness under the law, blameless.
So it's fair to say he's sort of the Jew of Jews, if you like. Yeah. He's the epitome of what a Jew should be in terms of knowing the law and engaging with the scriptures and so forth.
Yes. And a measure of that was that he would be an active persecutor of any deviating group like the followers of Jesus. So he says, I persecuted the church of God violently and tried to destroy it. So that's the Jerusalem years from about 17 to 34. And then we have the time in Damascus in Arabia. He goes to Damascus. We know the story well. Jesus speaks to him from heaven. and commissions him to preach the gospel. He goes into Damascus, where he's baptized, and then when he hooks up with other Christians in the city of Damascus. But he has to leave the city in a hurry, being lowered down a wall, so he goes to Arabia, and then after some years returns to Damascus, and then comes back to Jerusalem. Then there are what's sometimes called the hidden years, from 37 to 47, about 10 years, when he's in his home province of Syria and Cilicia. And he himself says, "Then I went into the regions of Syria and Cilicia, and I was still unknown in person to the churches of Judea that are in Christ. They only were hearing it said, 'He who used to persecute us is now preaching the faith he once tried to destroy.'" So the news of, although these are so-called hidden years, his active evangelism and church planting had come to the attention of Jewish Christians in Palestine.
So at this point, is it fair to say that Paul would have been unknown to the other apostles, to Peter, or at least not met Paul at this stage?
Yes, he had. In fact, he had met them when he came back from Arabia and Damascus. He actually lodged with Peter for 15 days, and he met James, the brother of the Lord, and he met other apostles, did some preaching, and was basically run out of town, and that meant he went back to his home province.
Right.
And the hidden years are there. They finish up when Barnabas comes to collect him, brings him to Antioch, and the rest of the story unfolds from there. So then we have the so-called mission years, 47 to 57. He says in 47, "On the contrary, when they, the other apostles, saw that I'd been entrusted with the gospel to the uncircumcised, just as Peter had been entrusted with the gospel to the circumcised, that is, the Jews. For he who worked through Peter for his apostolic ministry to the circumcised, the Jews, God also worked through mine to the Gentiles." Anyway, those three leaders, James, Peter and John, gave Paul and Barnabas the right hand of fellowship for them to go in a more intentional way to do mission work among the nations.
So it's a bit more coordinated now. The apostles are getting together and thinking about how do they evangelise, not just their own, but seeing that Paul has been commissioned to the uncircumcised, to the Gentiles. They've effectively commissioned him, is that right?
Endorsed, I think.
Endorsed, right.
Paul
I
would
suppose
argue
Jesus commissioned him, didn't he?
Jesus commissioned him, and he won't let anyone take that away from him. But they certainly did endorse him. So those years, 47 to 57, he establishes churches in Galatia, in Macedonia, in Achaia, and in Asia. At least 20 churches, I think, 20 that we know of in those 10 years, probably more. And we know that those churches in turn created daughter churches, and they turned into daughter churches. And so as he says in the Colossians letter, that the gospel is like a rapidly growing vine.
Right.
I've got a rockmelon vine in my backyard. It's growing like crazy. I don't see too many rockmelons on it, but it reminds me of the rapid spread of the gospel. And when you think about it, when the Roman Empire shifted its centre, its capital from Rome to Constantinople, it was by then a Christian empire, and that really grew out of the ministry of Paul in those Roman provinces, followed by the ministry of John. Really, that the fact that there were all those years, more than 1,000 years of Christianity in that part of the world before Islam took over, as it were, was all had its foundations in these mission years. And then lastly there are the prison years, 57 to 64. It's interesting, isn't it, that as many as 7 or 8 years were Paul's last years in which he really was, apart from a short period, he was imprisoned. So his freedom was denied him, and yet the work continued, and in a sense he supervised it even from prison. Even at the end, in 2 Timothy, his last writing, he's still arranging for further missionary work in what today we would call Bosnia, Croatia, and that sort of area. So he had an incredible heart for ministry, and we know well his very last words in the 2 Timothy letter: "I fought the good fight, I've finished the race, I've kept the faith. Henceforth there is laid up for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day. And not only to me, but also to all who have loved his appearing." So it's a wonderful story, and apart from Jesus, there is nobody in that world, in the ancient world, who's been so influential as the Apostle Paul. Okay, Lachlan, any contributions?
I just find his productive ministry incredible. To think that in those 10 years he planted around 20 churches, and those 20 churches have gone on and planted others. And I think back perhaps over my last 10 years, and I don't want to compare myself to an apostle, right? But it kind of makes you think how productive might we be, could we be in ministry if we had a heart like Paul's does, to see that word go out in incredible ways. And he was obviously commissioned by Jesus himself to go and do that, but an incredible ministry in those relatively short 10 years. And then, as you said, in prison afterwards, that although he's restricted in going out, I suppose we all feel a little bit like that at the moment, don't we? Where he was restricted from going out, it didn't in any way curtail his mission activities. He's sending out messengers. People are coming in. He's training them up. He's hearing about what's going on in the other churches, and he's sending them back. And that would have been a relatively slow process, as they literally walk from town to town. And yet here we are, I think, closed in our own lounge rooms and homes, and thinking, well, there's really not much ministry can be done, but perhaps there is. With the modern technology that we've got at the moment, it's very easy to pick up the phone or to do a little video call if you have that technology, and engage in new and wonderful ways. I've heard some exciting things about people from our own church just this week contacting friends and family and saying, look, we're going to church online, why don't you join in? And we've had people who've said, look, I invited families along to carols this year and we haven't seen them again, but I called them up and said, why don't you join in online? They've been joining in. Online. And we've had people report that, yes, neighbours next door and people in Mossman, but further afield, Walla Walla in southern New South Wales, Young in a similar sort of area, Singapore, people are tuning in, and even in the UK as well, there's people tuning in to our church service. So that's not to tout us personally, but people seeing the opportunity here whilst we're not imprisoned, I don't want to use that word, don't repeat that anyway, but whilst we're confined, we can still do ministry in incredible ways. So what an encouragement.
And I think that's part of the ministry, the message of the Philippians letter is in that, you'd think there couldn't be anything worse than being locked up in a jail awaiting trial for your own possible execution. And Paul sees it as an opportunity. It would be so easy to feel sorry for yourself and so on and so on, but no, not Paul. And so his faith, I think, is a great encouragement to us, that in times of difficulty, like we're going through at the moment, you say, well, what can I make of this? What can I do? My late mother-in-law had been a missionary in Brazil, where her husband died under tragic circumstances at 39 years of age. The Mission Society in the UK basically didn't do anything to help or bring her home or anything like that. And she had a saying, which I think could well have been based on Philippians. I don't know what the future holds, but I know who holds the future. I don't know what the future holds, but I know who holds the future. Yeah. And that could well have been a thought that Paul had. I don't know where this is going to go, but I know who's running the show.
Yes.
In the meantime.
And you get that real sense as you read through Philippians and some of the sayings that Paul has in Philippians. And one of my very favourite verses, Philippians 1:21, that we'll look at next time. For me to live is Christ and die is gain. It's that sense of, while I'm here, I'm living for Christ. But I don't know what the future holds. But whatever it is and whenever it is, it's going to be for God's glory. Yeah. So Paul now, he's imprisoned. He's pulled out pen and paper. And now he's writing to the Philippian church. Is that predominantly where it's going to, or is it a broader letter than that, perhaps?
No, so far as we know, although inevitably these letters were copied and shared. Yeah. Timothy is the co-sender or co-author. He may have been the scribe, the amanuensis, as it were. So many of Paul's letters he wrote with a colleague, and those colleagues may often have had some contribution to make to the ideas that are in the letter. We don't know that for sure. Anyway, we come to the first 5 verses.